It's really exciting. I mean, I was talking to Jeff Johns about this. That there's, you want to grow up to be a writer, and like that's already a dream come true and puts you in a small circle of people, but that you get to grow up and write The Flash and Green Arrow and Firestorm is like puts you in a very small circle of people who have been given the opportunity to play with these characters, and it's amazing.
One of the things you have played with in Arrow is who knows Oliver's secret identity and when they find out and why. What can you say about how you'll be doing the same thing here in Barry and how you'll kind of roll out the way people find out, or if you plan to roll out the way people find out?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit easier about The Flash, at least in the early going, than it was with Arrow, is by the end of the Arrow pilot, nobody knew that Oliver was the vigilante or that what he was doing. So much of those early episodes was bringing Dig on board, and then bringing Felicity, and the show didn't really become at the Arrow that I think we enjoy writing and that you guys have enjoyed watching until like sort of the back half of season 1, and Flash feels much more fully formed. By the end of the pilot episode, Joe knows what his secret, and the Star Labs people, he has his team, so there really aren't that many people on the show who don't know. Which in some ways has made it a lot easier because it's really been it's not just the story of Barry Allen, it's the story of all of these people helping him. But as always, like I always say, the least interesting aspect of these shows is Clark, you just missed Superman. Where were you? And,
Speak for yourself.
For us, as soon as anybody finds out, especially on Arrow, like when Felicity found out, when Tommy found out, when Laurel found out, it just made the show suddenly got easier and more exciting to us because you could have those conversations. And especially writing Arrow this year, now that Laurel knows, it's just made her dynamic with Oliver so much more interesting. I think that the people who don't know on Flash would probably find out a little sooner than they might have done on Arrow, just because we have the benefit of having seen what that storytelling does. And I also think that, because so many people know, it's not going to be like on Smallville, where a very small group of people knew, and they really were able, just structurally to let people in on the secret deeper into the series.
What is it about the medium of television that you're excited to explore, particularly that you don't think maybe did well in comic form, especially with The Flash?
I don't know.
Humor, or are there other things, aspects that maybe visually work better?
I don't know. In fact, if anything, the tougher thing was how are we going to, when you read a Flash comic book, you sort of accept it all. The actual physics of making it in motion, we were sometimes worried, was this going to look silly? Was it going to be fun? And so far we feel like we've been coming up with ways visually, to highlight his powers and showcase them. It's funny because so much of what we're doing, it is a more faithful adaptation of the comic books in an odd way than Arrow was. I mean, even though Green Arrow's been around for longer, there weren't as many sort of seminal books. There are eras of the Flash comics that are more comical, and there are eras that are more serious, and Jeff obviously with Rebirth and Flashpoint, sort of, changed, everything about the Flash, but all of that's in there. So, I think that, I think the ability to make you cry is something that, at least, I'm not sure people were always crying when they read the Flash comic, but, writing some of the stuff in there, regardless of the powers and whatnot, like, the scenes with Barry and his father and the scenes with Barry and Detective West, are just scenes about fathers and sons that, could be on any show.
Okay. How quickly do you plan on rolling out new costumes and characters? Like, by the end of 22 episodes, will it be 22 new? They got Firestorm, Weathermaster, first few episodes. Is that going to be obviously faster than Arrow? But how quickly?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by costumes. Like,
I guess more just like the powers.
People. Yeah, that's every episode will have a villain of the week. With new powers. We've announced obviously we're doing Plastique. We have the Weather Wizard, and obviously it was there were two brothers in that plane. We haven't heard what happened to the other one, so I suspect he'll be showing up at some time. Mark Martin, it's really an opportunity. On Arrow, we obviously had to stick to the non-powered heroes because we were trying to keep that show much more grounded. And then even when we had like heroes with powers like the Royal Flush Gang, we sort of Arrowified them and brought them back down to earth. But now we have this opportunity not just for Flash villains because the Flash is the best rogues gallery in town, but you also have a lot of other DC Comics villains from that aren't associated with like Superman and whatnot, but like villains from Hawkman and Green Lantern and the Atom that and Firestorm that we can have on the show. So I think that's part of the fun of the show is that every week he'll be, in addition to the overall big bad and the overall mythology like Arrow has, there's also going to be the sort of the monster of the week.
How do you the crossover event that everyone's excited about? Obviously, if you've got these evils with great powers and then more grounded Arrow villains, is it a worry that when the two worlds collide?
No, I think that's sort of the fun of it for us. I mean that was part of the reason in our long-term math of adding the Mirakuru in season 2 on Arrow and Slade and Deathstroke and the Army was. For us, it was a little bit of sort of like a gateway superpower. Like if you could accept that little bit, then the Flash wouldn't seem so completely out of bounds. And one of the things we've really strived to do this season is bring Arrow back down to earth because for us as writers and I'm sure as the audience, you guys don't want to see 2 hours of the same thing every week, and you want both shows to be what they are and be distinctive even though they're taking place in the same world. And I think the fun of those crossovers is going to be how Barry, despite his powers, sometimes comes up against a villain who doesn't have powers but is still able to be a match for him. And then likewise for Oliver, somebody who lives in has lived in a very Born Identity world, to suddenly be fighting somebody with superpowers, it's going to be a challenge. So we don't look at it as a a bad thing.
How much of that is fleshed out? Sorry, the crossover.
A lot.
Yeah.
Well, logistically, how many crossovers can you do per season? Are you thinking about a couple a season? Or are you thinking about just for the first season of Flash? Or
I don't know. We really kind of we have an overall map for the season on Arrow and Flash, just like we always do. Some of the specifics, especially towards the back half, are more. We know in general terms, what's going to happen, but right now we're really sort of on both shows, really focused on like the first 13, and, I guess for us, we, as always, it's like if we have a good idea, it's like we're like, why are we waiting? Why are we waiting to do this, or why wait to have a crossover event in the back half of the year? It's like, we want to see that, and I'm sure everybody else does, so let's just get to it. And I think, having Arrow in the Flash pilot sort of already set that up, so it's not going to, when it happens, it's not going to be a weird thing. And I think if anything, sometimes when you have spin-offs, you wonder like, well, that thing was so important on the one show, and now this person's on another show, and why aren't they talking, or why didn't they call each other? And sometimes that's just logistics or a fear or whatever. And for us, one of the big things was, Felicity was obviously very impacted by Barry Allen, and we saw that even after his episodes, she was still thinking about him, and his sister Caitlin, and coming over, and we learned a lot. So when we feel like even more important than the Arrow somehow was like getting Felicity and Barry to talk and work out their stuff. So we just feel like we have the opportunity, we have the support of the studio and the network, that all the things we want to do and hopefully all the things that fans want to see, we're just going to get to.